So it all started there, right? I used a picture of a Big Bang in 2008, 2009. So basically Bitcoin appeared, and what it solved is the dual spend, a few other technologies. And the main purpose of Bitcoin back then was really to say, okay, payments, right? Paying from A to B, although Satoshi had totally different motivations, in fact, but that's how it basically started. And that, to me, is the ground. And the only thing that evolved from then during this first kind of generation was, well, you had a few altcoins competing with it, and that's basically it, right? We moved on basically to what I call infancy in diversity. From there, I think that Ethereum really deserves a big applause because they created the smart contract, which added a totally different layer. I mean, you could in an arbitrary manner suddenly start to run certain things, supplement the judiciary. You could, they went and basically did a DAO. It was clearly an evolution, but at the same time, we saw a flurry really out of Bitcoin, blockchain, whatever, appear in the market with totally different or sometimes even totally similar purposes, right? And in my mind, the next evolution is what I call growth and reality. So you had a breaking point there somehow when you had Stellar appear in my mind in April 2015 because they introduced, it was Professor David Mazier with Jet McCaleb. They introduced the notion of having an approval quorum. It's also the time at which suddenly people realized that proof of work may not be the most efficient protocol, actually, the consensus protocol we need. So they built one basically where they said, well, we'll let you choose your quorum, i.e. the group of people you trust, and on a federated representative basis, we're going to let you approve basically transactions. That was an evolution. That was important in a certain sense. And it was nearer to reality because many people started realizing, especially in the financial industry, that the open systems are never going to be accepted by regulators, right? We had a lot of conversation with them. They clearly said, well, no, privacy is always going to be there, and we're never going to accept the open system in the financial world. In came, interesting enough, Hyperledger, that's the other logo out here, and they also changed the game by saying, well, actually, we will not have a coin. We won't. We'll just have a system to make transactions work, right? Very interesting. And from scratch, they kind of, ingrained the notion of having a permission network where everybody who was on that network is actually identified. So clearly, people like Hyperledger build a platform that is usable by the financial world, right? So that's what I call the phase of growth and reality. If I basically look at where we're right now, we are into profusion diversity. So we got people who are appearing, Light Network, Lightyear, and so on, and who are basically in this chaos trying to work on new challenges. But you don't know what blockchain does what, actually, and what blockchain is better and what the advantages are. We talked about ICOs prior. People write a white paper and then they get $10 million because they can write 10 pages. So it's like, oh, it's $1 million a page, so that works, But that's the world we're in, right? If I were today arrive in this world and say, okay, I want to learn something of blockchain. I want to choose a blockchain I want to use. I look at this, and apart from looking at the market capitalization of the biggest one, I would be there and say, well, I don't know what I have to use actually, right? And there are some people there who are trying to change things, right? I mean, obviously, Lightyear and Lightning Network are trying to address speed and stuff like that. That's where we are. If I now try to go into the outlook section, I ask myself the question, well, where will we go? And I divide it in three components. So one is the blockchain, and my definition, right? And I think in our world we should agree that sometimes it's somebody's definition as opposed to everybody's because it's evolving so fast. So there's the blockchain, basically a block of immutable components. And the question is, what's going to evolve there? Well, one thing that people are looking at is the quantity of data you can have on a block, right? It has been an issue. We worked, in fact, on building prototypes using 2 or 3 blockchains in parallel. And it's the only way, in fact, you can find out which blockchain is suitable for what. And we're not going to put names on anything here because then somebody's going to jump up and down and say, that's my blockchain, I love it, and they're great, and you didn't do it right, whatever. But one in there clearly had a limitation on 12 data strings per block. And we wanted to describe financial assets. Well, if you want to describe a position of financial assets, so you have the trade information and the position information on the assets, the stock exchange, the date, yada, yada, you kill. 12 data strings are used in a snap. In fact, you need at least double that to operate. So exit, else goes that chain. And many chains, in fact, have that issue, right? Limitations of data. So if they want to become scalable, usable, some of them will and are working, as I hear right and left, on basically increasing amount of data, right? Some of them, interesting enough, are doing that also because they think that one day they will fund themselves by actually selling the data that they collect on their chain, right? Now, you can only do that if you have more data strings per block, right? The other thing is, if you look at the blocks, it's basically the frequency with which the blocks are mined if you're in a proof of work environment, but don't forget there are other environments. But there's a frequency of transactions, right? You know, Bitcoin, everybody talks about 10 minutes. It's just too limiting for some people. If you want to, act in financial markets in a world where you have people doing kind of algorithm-based tradings, right? Ultra-fast trading, 10 minutes is a universe of time. These guys trades in milliseconds. You know how much 10 minutes can make in that market? We're talking big money here. So they're never going to be able to use that kind of technology. So that's what one avenue of changes that are being looked at on the blockchain side. On the consensus side, well, they're huge questions, really. I mean, proof of work is getting more and more expensive. I had a discussion this morning with somebody who's working in emerging markets and told me, well, it actually used to be cheap. It's getting more and more expensive to do remittances, right? And proof of work. Very simple, because the price is can only go one way, right? Up. So for a lot of use cases, proof of work's not going to fly. We heard a lot about, Vlad this morning made this allusion about deposits and all that. Well, it's all about proof of stake at the end of the day, right? That's what he's talking about, right? That's another solution, but we have other consensus types out there, right? You saw Enigma, basically, who's working, these guys at MIT are building this new consensus, basically, where you will participate in a consensus without even being identified, and nobody knows who you are, and you don't even know you participate. You just say, I'm willing to play in the network, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just doing something, and I'm participating, and basically, boom, it goes, right? It's strange, but maybe that's a solution, to become passive participants in this. So that's another avenue that people are looking at right now, which is really key, super important, because consensus is about trust, right? We can argue about the data. There may be use cases that, where you don't need huge amounts of data and so on, but if the trust portion does not work, forget about the rest in a certain sense. The third avenue is our ledgers, right? The nodes, right? Obviously, a lot is being done in terms of identifying people on the nodes, right? And little warning here, this pseudonymous thing on basically Bitcoin. To be very clear, it's really pseudonymous. I had a discussion with a lady who actually prosecuted Silk Road, and man, was I impressed what they actually can see on Bitcoin, right? Okay, if anybody sits in this room and think they're anonymous and that stuff, you're not. You need to add layers to that, okay? But it goes beyond. There's an industry initiative in Luxembourg. They call it InfraChain. And they realized that, as the Luxembourg government launched this with a few companies, well, if this scales and the financial world starts using blockchain technology to do huge amount of transactions, suddenly the nodes are actually going to really matter. Because if a node is down, well, you're in trouble. So they're building this infrastructure where the nodes will never be down, always secure, ready to transact millions of transactions if need be. They don't care with which chain that's going to be done. But you need those nodes to operate like that and to be safe, because a lot of it's going to be personal data in there, right? It's a very interesting initiative, basically, because they're preempting what's going to happen in the market afterwards, and they realize no infrastructure, no gain. And I haven't seen a lot of other initiatives out there in the market, right? So I just invite you, look at these three components. There may be other ideas in the room. At the end of the day, you may decide on which component you want to evolve first or which combinations you want to take, but they're kind of important. Moving on. Looking at the outlook, I think that blockchain will go far further than we think in terms of what it's going to impact on. The first one I put there is an enabler of IoT. I have a lot of discussions with people who are looking at IoT. It's a big buzzword, basically. But if we all like wired here, and I'm going to walk in a supermarket, and every good I put in my, caddy is going to be just taken off my account automatically, and then if I go running, basically it's going to be transferred to my medic, and maybe if I'm healthy during the week, my medic insurance is going to go down because I live a healthy life, but then I'm going to eat some potatoes with cheese, and then it's going to go up again, right, because I live an unhealthy life again. All these IT things will only be valuable if there's more information. People say, okay, we'll just share information, provide you information, whatever you do in life. But The add-on layer, like with blockchain, by the way, is in fact to add transfers of value to the IoT. Now we're talking of millions and millions of transactions out there. And this will only work with a traceable system, actually. And that is blockchain. So blockchain, they will be an enabler of IoT, right? The other type of evolution I see, I touched on it at the very beginning. So it all started with transferring money, right? Bitcoin to get pizza, be like money in a certain sense. And then like Stellar, transfer money from A to B. The next evolution I see actually is that people are going to use blockchain-based technology to transfer far more complex assets. I mean, a lot of assets like paintings or ledger with diamonds are now being blockchainized, but in fact, it's not used a lot yet to transact assets. You can transact bonds, equities. I mean, as far as I know, there's overstock out there. They did an equity issue last year, and they said we're going to issue dual stream equity. The same equity is going to be issued, the same stock is going to be issued in blockchain in a classical fashion. But I haven't seen a lot of people doing it. Be aware, in the future, is more going to be coming about that. Be prepared to reflect or to replicate more assets than today on blockchain. And if that doesn't work, then you don't have the right blockchain, right? The other thing is basically broad access to financial services. Now, a lot of people are working on this right now. And one of the arguments is because it's cheaper, it's more effective and faster. But there's going to be far more to be done in this space, right? Right now, we talked about it a lot. There are plenty of underbanked people out there. And this technology is basically going to allow them, because of the cost, because also of the speed, to get on board. And I'll just do a quick excursion on this one. KYC is a big one too, right? A lot of people talk about the fact that, well, okay, if you do KYC, you can kind of, decide as a user to put your KYC information in one repository, then you get a hash and a token, and then you share that with whomever you want from there, right? And that makes your life much easier. You don't have to redo the KYC as long as the original repository is a trusted bank or whatever it is. As a matter of fact, nothing new here. ING in the 90s, when KYC was lighter, when they opened all these direct banking accounts, their KYC was based on the fact that the only way you could make money to them is to wire it from an existing account. And if it came from an account within the European Union, for example, they said, well, they did the KYC, so we're fine. So there's nothing new really here, right? What is maybe new is if you accept that basically your blockchain-based transactions are traced, right, semi-public, in fact, that's a form of KYC, because a lot of KYC now, the modern version of them, are like based on your behavior. Some banks, like Fidor Bank, for example, do your KYC through Facebook, right? And through Facebook, they see how you behave, how many people you know, and they infer, okay, we can start basically, this seems to be a real person based on their behavior on Facebook, so we can start basically onboarding the person for a limited type of amount, whatever, right? Well, imagine you would be willing to share what you do on a blockchain, your daily transactions. It's a form of KYC in a certain sense, behavioral KYC. So that's another avenue when you look at, right? Information management. Clearly, if we look at artificial intelligence is in fact, the main role of AI is two avenues. One is to make decisions for you. The other one is to help you make decisions. In both cases, you need traceable information to feed the AI. The problem that a lot of AI systems have today is they get information, but they cannot really trace the information. Now, if the information is blockchainized suddenly, in a certain manner, you can trace the information. Who actually used this? Who actually did this, right? The whole purpose of the chain, right? And that can make AI far more precise and help you a lot in terms of your decision-taking, right? I wrote the backbone for new operating models. Definitely the blockchain is going to change the world in terms of how banks and also other operators work. Give you another example. We talk about car ownership, which is becoming increasingly absurd, right? We talk about self-driving cars in the future. I could imagine stepping in my house, basically. In fact, I lived in Paris for 2 years, and they have these Autolib, they call it. These are cars, you find them in every street corner. You buy kind of a 1 year of 1 year of fee. Basically, everything's covered insurance. You go in that car and you get charged by the half hour you drive them, right? Increasingly, I think that's what's going to happen, right, out there. You're going to use objects, but to make this happen, the blockchain, the information stored in the blockchain that's going to follow you is going to enable these new business models. Vlad talked about it this morning, asked him a question. The other big thing, the question we need to ask is about governance out there. it is essential, basically, that we agree on what would happen if there's a problem. If we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble. But I won't dip into it, time being limited. I wanted just to go on talk about two other big topics. One is, it is important, whatever we do, we find the adapted chain. So I see so many people, and I'm going to ask you now, I mean, who is using one chain in their business in terms of developing and using one chain? Okay, one person is using a chain. Wow, so all the others, you don't use any blockchain in your daily lives or? Okay, good. Now my next question, who's using two? Wow, okay. 3? 4, okay. You know where I'm going with this. When we actually develop product, we use up to 4 chains, and it's the only way I said from scratch that you can figure out what is basically more effective. The other thing I want to talk about is here double chain resilience. I haven't seen a lot of experiments in that space, but if you're going to transfer or work with assets with high value, I'll make an analogy with space. If a satellite rocket is sent in space, there are usually 2 computers with different systems who calculate the trajectory. We're talking a lot of money here, right? And if there's a mismatch, a third one will kick in and basically solve that mismatch, right? The question I'm posing, I know the answer for that, is basically if for certain really highly important blockchain applications, we would use 2 chains in parallel, let's say Hyperledger and Ethereum, for example, to do the same thing. Would that create more resilience or not? I'm just posing the question, but I think when we get into doing high-value transaction, evolve it to the next stage, this is going to be a very, very important question. So what I see also happening is basically we're gonna go from the smarties into what I call focus. A lot of blockchain groups are going to say, okay, we're going to focus on certain use cases. We're not going to serve everybody. So we're going to have these little islands there. And I think what is really essential if you do that is basically create interoperability, right? So whatever you do, if you decide you want to focus on, let's say, I'm a blockchain for transportation, you do need to make sure that your chain communicates with the other chain, else you're going to lose a lot of value. But the point is a lot of people working with blockchain will have to do that because there won't be enough space for all of them, right? And basically that's my talk. I have a few other examples I wanted to talk about, but we did build what we call a smart match reconciliation tool just to make it more lively. And we decided to build on chain. Then we build it basically on Ethereum, then on Stellar, then on Hyperledger. That way we found out that for that use case, Hyperledger is the best solution. No offense, Vlad, right? But that's a very important step. And basically we're eclectic today in the sense that we don't really care that if tomorrow the new chain appears that seems more powerful to us, although we are fans of some chain, we'll simply switch. So with that, I hope I'll give you a few ideas you may want to explore, and I thank you for listening. Thank you.